Predict, pick, and prevail in your fantasy football leagues with Nick Giacobbe and Nick Kap. From breakouts to busts, superstars to sleepers, these are the guys that will help you achieve fantasy glory. This is the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast.
Welcome, everybody, to Season 4, Episode 35 of the PrimeTime Fantasy Football Podcast. I am your host for the day, Nick Kap. Usually, of course, the main host, Nick Giacobbe, leading off the show, but unfortunately a little bit under the weather. This week, he should hopefully be back for our Sunday live show. It is a little bit of a late recording for me. Thursday night, right after this big Jets win against the Houston Texans. Big games for your fantasy guys. Breece Hall had a solid day, and then obviously Garrett Wilson with the 30 bomb, Devontae the late touchdown. Those two kind of make some pretty good Thursday night fantasy football games for you guys. So hopefully you guys were able to start them, and Tank Dell, who had another big game. So those guys all clicked, had great games, and was a very entertaining football game, to say the least, from my end. But Halloween yesterday for you guys. Big football game yesterday, but huge weekend ahead. We're going to prepare you. I got my all boom team, all bust team, and my late round sleeper that I would add to your lineups. We'll talk about that when we get to the end of the show. But if this is your first time listening, thank you so much for joining the Primetime Fantasy Football Podcast. Usually 2 of us here running the show. 3 episodes per week is what we aim for. Typically, our Tuesday waiver show. Thursday or Friday, you get our all boom bust teams, guys that we think are going to explode on the week, make your week. And guys that are typically your stars, your usual starting candidates, maybe flex options that we tell you are going to bust, that we don't think are going to play so well. That's the run of the show. And then Sunday, we answer every single live question in our live Q&A. 8:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We are live for typically an hour and a half, sometimes get up to 2 hours, but we answer every single question and give you an in-depth analysis. I know sometimes you're scrolling on TikTok, you want to drop that question, and maybe you get lucky enough to hear one word answer. Yeah, no, that's not good enough for us. Nick and I give you that in-depth analysis. So make sure you like, comment, subscribe, especially on our YouTube channel, Facebook, Instagram, Primetime Fantasy Football Podcast, Twitter, Primetime FF Pod. But most importantly, as I mentioned, definitely YouTube. YouTube's our biggest platform. It's the number one place we like to stream, especially for our live stream episodes on Sundays. Like, comment, subscribe. Definitely hit that notification bell. You roll over on that Sunday morning, pick up that phone, and you will see that tab. Just click on it, and you can get right into your start sits right from there. So definitely make sure to stop by. All right, we're going to kick it off with the all boom team to start the show. We love doing this, and sometimes we get it extremely right. Sometimes not so much. Last week was not a great week. We won't get totally into it. We will be accountable. Go feel free to check out the Instagram or last week's episode to compare some good picks, not some great picks. But this week, we're feeling really confident, and we're rolling with a guy we don't usually roll with on the show. Dak Prescott, all boom, going up against the Atlanta Falcons in the highest over-under game of the week, 51.5. Typically, I like going with Kirk Cousins in this spot. But me and Nick have picked Kirk Cousins a bunch of times in the last few weeks. He has hit on a lot of those cases. So we're going to switch it. We're going to go the Dak Prescott side of things. Falcons this year allow over 18 every game this year, 18 total points in every single game. They have not had a single very good defensive showing in that regard for a team that has a bunch of talent on that side of the ball. And the Cowboys, the one thing they can do, they can find a way to put that ball in the end zone. I know that offense is not great, but when it is these weaker defenses, they tend to pick them apart and play pretty well. I know Raheem Morris, defensive coach, maybe some concerns there. I'm not too worried. Right now, they allow the 7th most points per game to the quarterback position, which is great. And Dak has been kind of good. The only other time Dak played a team that has allowed top 10 points per game to the quarterback position, he was a QB2 on that week. 380 yards and 3 total touchdowns in that matchup. So Dak Prescott, when he gets these weaker defenses, he takes advantage. The Cowboys, anyone watches the Fox Sports shows, they love to beat up on those tomato cans. They like to beat up on those easy defenses. It's the one thing that they've made their name off of these last few years. So I'm confident in Dak Prescott and his ability to run the table. Maybe not win wise, but I think fantasy wise, he definitely will overperform because he's been a great stat sheet stuffer for years, and this is a great opportunity for him to get back on track when he gets these easier matchups ahead. Going over the running back position, I'm going with DeAndre Swift going up against the Arizona Cardinals. Cardinals allow top 5 points per game to the running back position, and the Cards haven't won back to back since 2021. It's a weird stat, but the last 2 games they did win, and now they get the Chicago Bears. I don't think they're going to play very well. I think the Bears are going to run this team all over. That defense has looked stout for weeks. If they did not have that Hail Mary, that defense would have cooked the Commanders, and we probably watched Chicago be a favorite in this game. Unfortunately, they are not. I think Chicago is going to absolutely roll, and this is going to benefit the running game. And DeAndre Swift, I called him out after week 3. I said he has been the worst player in football, and he's proved me wrong since. He's had a floor of 18.9 in each of those games, so he cannot be benched at this point for sure. But I think he has a shot to be the RB1, RB2, RB3 on the week, which is why I am going to put him on the All Boom team, because when we make our shot that we think they're going to be that explosive and win you the week, then you deserve to get that called out on the show. And I haven't given him the benefit of the doubt at any point this year, so we're going to do it today. Next up, RB2 for the All Boom team, David Montgomery. Again, another guy that's been great, really solid, hasn't exploded too much, but we got some fun stats for you here. In his 7 games that he's played, he has 7 touchdowns on the ground, none in the air. Well, actually 1 in the air because he passed one over to Jared Goff, but no receiving touchdowns. So 8 total touchdowns in the 7 games that he has played, which is good. 1 touchdown per game is pretty solid for sure. It works for a fantasy floor, but he hasn't really hit that ceiling. Well, he did last year up against the Green Bay Packers, division rival team that he's going to get to play this season. And right now, the Packers are a little bit of a middle of the pack team to the running back position, but I think David Montgomery and this Lions team are going to run all over them, and I think they're going to roll them over in this matchup. I like both these teams a lot, but the Lions, they are playing on a different universe right now. Last year, David Montgomery, his 2 division games up against them, he had over 200 yards and 4 total touchdowns between those 2 games. So lock him in every week because, you kind of have to. I think he only has 1 game under 14.5 this year. But this is kind of one of those spot starts where he can literally win you the week by himself. So we're going to buy into David Montgomery, and we're going to expect him to, again, finish in the top 10 and be one of those explosive running backs. Wide receiver position. Wide receiver 1, I'm rolling with Michael Pittman. We all know Joe Flacco is the quarterback over there. Anthony Richardson gets benched. Huge opportunity for Michael Pittman to cook. And he has in his games with Joe Flacco this year. We'll give a quick comparison. So Pittman has played 5 games with Anthony Richardson as the starter. He is averaging less than 6.5 points per game in those games. In his 3 games with Joe Flacco, he's averaging 15 points per game, about a 9-point swing. The best game that he had with Anthony Richardson was 9.3 points. He has not cracked double digits with Anthony Richardson as the starting quarterback. Joe Flacco started for the rest of the year. The worst game he had with Joe Flacco was 12.5. Now he gets his easiest matchup of the season going up against the Vikings, who allow the second most points per game to the wide receiver position. Everything makes sense for Michael Pittman to have his best game of the year. He's cracked 10 with Flacco. He's cracked 12, obviously, with that being the floor. He's not reached that 20 mark. I think he hits that 20 mark this week. Now let's go into another receiver, somebody that had cooked last week. Rookie receiver for the Chargers, Ladd McConkey. He was the wide receiver 2 on the week. Obviously his best game of his career with 29.1 points, 6 catches for I think 110 or 111 yards, and 2 touchdowns in that match. I'm not sure you're going to get that great of a performance, but going up against the Browns, a team that allows top 5 points per game to the position. And the Chargers, they've had some kind of a massive culture shift. We know Jim Harbaugh likes to run the ball, and he's still going to do that. But since the bye week, they had an early bye in week 4, they've shifted the offense a bit. They're letting Herbert air the ball out a little bit more and play a little bit closer to the stat sheet stuff where we like. Not enough for him to be locked and loaded in your fantasy lineup, Justin Herbert, like he was for his rookie, his second, and his third year in the league. But he's, before the bye in those 3 games, he was averaging 22.75 pass attempts per game, roughly 23, and his most that he had in a game was 27. 27 is not a lot for the quarterback position. But since the bye, in his last 3 games, he has 35 passing attempts per game, and his low has been 32. So his low since his bye has been better than his high in his before the bye. So that's great trends and great opportunity. And Lad McConkey, who's averaging 7 targets per game since the bye, you got to trust him in these matchups with his guys. If you have McConkey on your bench, if you haven't been confident enough to start him, this is the matchup. All the trends are pointing in the right direction for the Chargers passing wise, and you can expect him to be a little bit more solid and consistent for the rest of the year. I'm buying into McConkey. I have him on a couple teams. Haven't had the confidence to start him yet. This is definitely the first time where you can really, really lock him in and feel good about it. Next up, tight end position. I am rolling with Cole Kmet. The Cardinals, again, bad against this position. Last week, Cole Kmet went up against the Washington Commanders. So if you are a Kmet owner and you did play him, well, Nick and I kind of warned you not to play him because they are one of the best teams against the tight end position. But now he gets a great opportunity against the Cardinals, who are not great against the position. So you got to start him in those opportunities. And we got to remember how good he was. Last week, again, Commanders' tough defense. Week before that, bye week. In the 4 games prior, 2 of those performances, he finished as the tight end 1 and the tight end 2 in those games, in the last 4 games prior to. So the Bears offense was rolling in that span. They had a very rough game off the bye. I expect Shane Waldron to switch that offense back to how he had it. He tried to get a little creative on Dan Quinn. Dan Quinn, very good defensive coach. So I think they're going to revert back to what they were, and they should take advantage of this Cardinals offense in this matchup. Next up, flex position. I am rolling with Tyrone Tracy. He has been, Nick and I like Bucky Irving. Tyrone Tracy has probably been the best rookie running back this season. In 3 of his last 4 games, he scored over 14 points. 2 of his last 3 games, he finished as an RB7 or better. So that is tremendous. And I know people are scared of Devin Singletary. Well, last week, we got to watch that shift. Devin Singletary only played 39% of snaps. Tyrone Tracy played 60%. Now going up in a matchup to the Washington Commanders, who, yes, they are a good team. Yes, they did play pretty well last week. Not great enough against DeAndre Swift, but we got to watch these 2 teams face at the beginning of the year. Devin Singletary in that game scored 14.5. If you guys remember, that is a game the Giants could not find the end zone, but they scored a ton of field goals or turnover and downs or interceptions. I don't think they punted in the entire game. So Tyrone Tracy, who has definitely outplayed Devin Singletary and is clearly the better running back, should outscore that 14.5 mark if everything makes sense in football, which doesn't always make sense, but I would definitely lean that way. So we're going to send it over to the all bust teams. Let's talk about some guys that I really don't like this week. And we're going to lead it off. Nick's not here to defend his guy, but I'm going to go with Geno Smith. I am sure Nick might have actually put Geno on the bust list too. And listen, leads the league in passing yards, has been great in some aspects, has been good for fantasy, hasn't found the end zone enough, but going up against the Rams, that is a scary matchup for any quarterback, but especially Geno Smith. Geno, the Rams just crushed him, man. Last year when he played against this team, he only averaged 172 and a half passing yards in each of those games, and he only had 1 touchdown in each of those games. That is not good for fantasy football, and that's not great opportunity. He's also not passing enough in those matchups. They've ramped up the passing with the new coaching, but he only completed 19 passes in those games. So that is really not a good opportunity, not enough workload, not enough passing volume. And there's a very real shot that they're without DK Metcalf in this matchup. If that is the case, I am definitely pivoting off Geno Smith, but I do think there's enough other pivot options. I'm sure Dak Prescott is on some of your waiver wires, a guy that I have on the old boom. Kirk Cousins, Matthew Stafford in this spot, much better. Even Justin Herbert, if they keep ramping up the passing volume, could be a better play. You could escape with a Trevor Lawrence in his matchup against the Eagles. I know they're a big underdog in that one, but that passing volume does remain high. I'm sure there's concerns about the wide receiver position, but Engram, Etienne, if both of those guys are out there, they'll catch reception. So I think it's good enough to pivot off Geno Smith, who already is a fringe starting quarterback. It's a matchup-based guy, but I think he might have one of his worst games of the year. I wouldn't be surprised if he got jumped in the passing yards this week as well. Running back position, RB1, Rachaad White going up against the Kansas City Chiefs. You could include Bucky Irving in this. You can include Sean Tucker if you want. any of these running backs, whoever the starter is, I really don't want them. But we're going to target Rachaad White because, well, I think it's a little bit easier to talk Rachaad White when Bucky Irving has been so much better. But the big reason really is the Chiefs are just the best team against the running back position. They are ranked number one. And we're getting into some in-depth stats because I saw this on FS1 this week and I could not believe some of these numbers. So right now, not a single running back of the 7 teams that the Kansas City Chiefs have faced have rushed for more than 60 yards in a single game. None of the RB ones. Only one rushed for more than 3.5 yards per carry. So it's inefficiency, and there's not enough volume for you to break that mark. Maybe one of these Bucks running backs does it, but history shows us otherwise. Some other good stats to note: if you combined all the rushing stats of all the running backs that have faced them, the RB ones, it combines for a whopping 242 rushing yards in 7 games, 2.6 yards per carry. That is an average of less than 35 yards per game to the running back one. I know what you're thinking. Well, who are they facing? Are they playing the Raiders and Alexander Madison? Well, yeah, they had one of those. Are they playing J.K. Dobbins and the Chargers? Well, Dobbins has been really good this year, maybe not great. Have they played the Broncos with Javonte, who hasn't been good? No, they haven't played them yet. Here's some of the running backs they faced: Bijan Robinson, Derrick Henry, Jordan Mason, Alvin Kamara. Yeah, that's some of the most elite running back talent in football at the moment. So this might be one of the historically best defenses against the run. And I'm not going to take my shot on some fringe running back like Rachaad White. You're going to need the PPR work to give him an advantage. And yeah, he might get it, but there is no way on the ground any of these running backs are going to be efficient enough. So to me, it's touchdown or bust, or 7-8 targets for Rachaad White. I don't think that's going to happen. So I mentioned his name, might as well mention it again. RB2, Javonte Williams, who had a couple solid performances the last few weeks. But his top 20 performances came against bottom 5 running back defenses. So he is taking advantage of those good matchups. Now he gets the Baltimore Ravens, who are a top 10 team against the running back position. Part of it is they're so weak on the secondary that teams have just had to target them there. Another piece of it is the Ravens get up big and every team has to pass the ball, and the game script is beneficial for wide receivers, not as beneficial for the running back position. So that's not great, but the Ravens are a huge favorite in this game. They have been blowing teams out. They are going to get off to a huge lead, and it's going to be up to Bo Nix and the Broncos to try and find a way to come back. They also just came off their biggest win of the year, points-wise, not Panthers really, but they're coming off their best game rolling. When you got that high emotional spot, yeah, it's not going to happen. They're also facing a Ravens team who's probably really pissed off that they lost to Jameis Winston and the Browns, and that defense who could have forced turnovers, and Kyle Hamilton, one of the best safeties in the league, drops one. Yeah, I think the Ravens are going to find a way to kind of crush the Denver Broncos this week. I really don't like that spot. Some other thing to note, Javonte does get passing work game. He gets actually a very good amount of it. So you might think it gives him a decent floor. But of his 8 games, he has 5 of them under 10, with 10 points or fewer. One was exactly 10, so I got to give him that. But over half his games are 10 points or fewer. So you might think the safe floor with the passing work, not as safe as you might think. So when I made my all boom, all bust teams, typically I make the list early in the week and I think about tweaking it. And there's someone I wrote down here and I said, I can't believe I had this guy on my all bust team. And I started looking into some of my notes and re-looking at it. And then I said, oh, that kind of makes a little bit of sense. But this is a guy I really like, Devontae Smith. Yeah, I mean, I said I thought he was going to have a great year. I wanted him in a lot of leagues. Couldn't get him anywhere. He's coming off a huge game last week. He faces the Jacksonville Jaguars, a team that is horrible to the wide receiver position. So I know what you're thinking. Everything makes sense for you to like this guy this week. Well, I noticed one stat, which kind of gives me worry for Devontae Smith. Since the bye week, this team's culture has entirely shifted. Nick Sirianni has these guys running the ball a lot more, which makes sense. And Jalen Hurts obviously was going to run. Saquon's going to run. But it's at an absurd volume, and the targets are only going really A.J. Brown's way. Over the last 3 games, he had 2 very solid performances. Those came with touchdowns. Only 13 targets. One of the games he actually had less than 1 point, which was kind of crazy to me. I think he fumbled in the game. But at the beginning of the year, he was getting 8, 9, 10, 11 targets in those games. He was getting a ton of that workload. So listen, I'm not going to lie to you. This is one of the riskiest picks I've ever had on the all bust team, and I'm going to put my stamp on it. since I said it earlier in the week, I'll roll with it. And here's what I'm going to say. I think that the Eagles are just going to very much dominate this game on the ground. We watched them destroy the Bengals last week, and Devontae did have a very good game there. I think it's going to be the superstar show. It's going to be A.J. Brown. It's going to be Jalen Hurts. It's going to be Saquon Barkley. And Devontae Smith might be the odd man out in this one. Next up, there is one cornerback in football for fantasy that I will always fade. Patrick Surtain. He absolutely clamps wide receiver ones. And I know what you're thinking. Baltimore Ravens. We talked about this game script, this matchup before. He's got Zay Flowers. And to me, I don't think the game script is going to be great for Zay. I think they get out to a very early lead. I think that the Ravens do not need to play catch up in this matchup. I could be totally off base on this, but based off what I've seen through 8 weeks, I don't think I'm too far off on that. And Patrick Surtain is going to have his number and clamp him. Now, something we did not have a chance to discuss since it happened since our Tuesday show, Deontay Johnson was traded to this team. And maybe you're thinking, is Deontay the best route runner? Is he the wide receiver one for this team, plugged and played? I don't think so. He'll definitely have an opportunity to earn that and definitely will take targets away from Zay Flowers, which will hurt. I don't think he's going to have that big of an impact in week one. We saw 3 receivers get traded earlier this year: Devontae Adams, Amari Cooper, DeAndre Hopkins. All those guys had, outside of Adams, the other 2 had a 50% or less snap share. They were really not getting utilized right off the trade. Adams was a little bit of a different situation. He was in this offense before, so a little bit different there, but none of them really saw great fantasy production. Amari Cooper saw the touchdown, which made his week, but he didn't see enough of the field. So I don't think Deontay is really going to be out there as much, which means Zay Flowers is going to be the number 1 target by Patrick Surtain. Flowers is also a really weird player. He has 3 games this year under 4 targets, and then he has 5 games this year over 9. He has nothing in between. He has no games between 5 and 8 targets this year, which makes absolutely no sense for a receiver of his caliber. But that literally means he's either exploding for the big game or he has a brutally low floor where he has 3 games this year under 6 points. So it's one or the other for sure. Don't know which way it can go any week, but I'm always going to bet on the Patrick Surtain side of things and choose to bench Zay Flowers in this matchup. Next up, guy I've loved going into the season, and he is showing every reason why I loved him, but I do not trust Kyle Pitts. I don't think anybody trusts Kyle Pitts to sustain this. He has 4 straight games over 10 points. He is the tight end 3 in the last 4 games, the back half, or I guess the second quarter of the year. 8 games, so 4 games, half of it, he's the tight end 3. Pretty great for him. But the last 4 games came against the 4 of the 5 teams that allow the most points to the tight end position on the year. Now, maybe you're thinking part of that is that Kyle Pitts did destroy them, but there's 7 other games that they played, so he's not the only one. Also, now they're going up against the Dallas Cowboys. I like the high over-under, so I'm not benching Pitts because of the streak he's been on. But the Cowboys are awful to the wide receiver position. Drake London, Darnell Mooney should be primed for big spots in this one. They're a little above average to the tight end position, which isn't great for fantasy. It's not enough reason to bench him. But I just do not trust that Kyle Pitts is going to sustain this level of play. And this is one of the tougher matchups. Again, not a super tough matchup for Kyle Pitts, but this is his toughest matchup since week 2. Week 2 is the only team that he played that was a top 16 team against the tight end position in terms of like teams struggle against them. So I just don't see him being this consistent for this long. We have not seen this in his entire career. I think more often than not, if you bet against Kyle Pitts, it's going to work out in the long run because there's no way he sustains this based off what we've seen in his career. Last, all bust candidate Keon Coleman, another rookie wide receiver. Listen, Miami's the best team against the wide receiver position. They are really, really solid, and I don't think Keon Coleman's going to sustain his last 2 games. The last 2 games have been good. 7 targets in each of those. He has been solid. I believe he had 16 and 18. He had a touchdown in each of those. He definitely had a touchdown in each of them. But listen, Amari Cooper is going to get more and more worked into this offense. Last week, he had a very low snap percentage. They did not give up all that draft capital to barely use him. He is going to make his way out onto that field and be a very solid receiver for this team. Keon Coleman went up against the Miami Dolphins earlier this year, and if you've watched the show for a little while, you know how I feel about that. If you are in a division matchup and it's the second time around, I'm always going to base my prediction off what you did the first time. And the first time he played them, yes, he had his highest snap share as a wide receiver to any game this season at 91%. He put up 0 points in the matchup. That's enough reason for me not to want to play him this week. All right, last up, we're going to give you a deep sleeper, a wide receiver, running back, quarterback, tight end, one of these guys that's owned in less than 30% of your leagues that you can pick up. These numbers are based off ESPN. I have two guys here, same team, same position. I think that there's an opportunity for the Carolina Panthers wide receiver one to be very solid. And we're lucky enough that they have two rookies that are big bodies, and Deontay's out of there, and Andy Dalton will be back in the next couple weeks. But I want to be a week early than a week late. So, first up, Xavier Legette, rookie wide receiver. I believe he was a first-round pick. He was either the last pick of the first round or the first pick of the second round. I always forget. But somewhere between the 31st and the 34th pick of the draft. Xavier Legette is huge. I mean, this dude is 6'2", 227, and runs a 4.39 40. That's a massive fast receiver. That is great, tangible things to know about him. And then we also know he was drafted super early. This team is invested in him. This team does think he has a huge upside. And we saw it the last few games. 3 of his last 5 games, he had over 11 points. He's been a red zone threat for this team. He's someone that they target down there. And he's going to be great now that Deontay's not there. He's going to get that guaranteed workload. And we know one thing about the Carolina Panthers. They're going to need to pass the ball because they've been so awful that the game script is always wide receiver positive. So when Andy Dalton returns, he will be a top waiver wire target, whether it's that week or the week after. And I want to be the week early. We saw the good game from Legette last week, and we know the draft capital put in. I believe he was actually on in less than 10% of leagues before this waiver cycle. So this number did take a jump up. But I did tell you there's 2 wide receivers. So if Xavier Legette's owned in one league, I want you to pick him up in the other. And then in this league, Jalen Colker, owned in less than 2% of your fantasy leagues. Last week, he was the wide receiver 17. He is a rookie. He did get 6 targets. And he's slightly bigger than Xavier Legette. He's 6'3", similar weight, similar speed. Listen, one of them is going to break out. Like I said, you're probably in multiple fantasy football leagues if you're invested in listening to a fantasy football show. At least that's what I would imagine. So if I were you, I'd pick up Legette in League 1, and I would pick up Coker in the other league. And I think one of the two will have a very solid week. This week against New Orleans, maybe both of them have very solid weeks, but that's the guy that I want to stash long-term on my team. All right, thank you everybody for joining in and tuning into the show. Again, Primetime Fantasy Football Podcast. That's where you can find us on your social media platforms. Primetime FF Pod on Twitter. Make sure you join us this Sunday for our live show, our premium show, the show that we love to do for you guys, our fantasy football community. Answer those questions in real time, get you those answers, help you make your start sit decisions, and help you win your fantasy football leagues. Feel free to join us 8:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Looking forward to seeing you all there.